Welcome to The Walking Dread, the show where we delve into addictive horror stories and terrifying tales and ancient curses that are sure to keep you up at night. We aim to deliver these scares with masterful storytelling and a touch of dark fun. If you enjoy being spooked, please rate and follow for more episodes. Tonight we're plunging into a truly unsettling narrative that you shared with us, the campfire tale of the Night Watcher and the horrifying reality it unveils. This story titled Mirror, Mirror, taps into a primal fear we can all understand, the fear of the dark. And to help us unpack the layers of terror within this narrative, I'm joined by our resident expert in fear and folklore. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's fascinating to delve into a story that clearly resonated so deeply with you. When you sent this over, the way it played with such a fundamental fear was immediately apparent.
Absolutely. Picture this with us. A crackling campfire, the woods all around, and old Charlie spinning a spooky yarn for a group of campers, including a young woman named Liv. Now, you mentioned that what struck you initially was how this wasn't just a vague monster story. It centered on a creature called the Night Watcher, a paralyzing entity that supposedly used mirrors as gateways. It sounds like classic campfire creepiness, right? But there's a specificity here that feels different.
That's right. As we look at how fear functions in these kinds of narratives, the introduction of a tangible element like mirrors is key. It provides a focal point for anxiety, something concrete the characters and by extension us can latch onto. It's less amorphous dread and more a defined threat with a seemingly defined vulnerability. It gives the illusion of control, even if that control is ultimately illusory.
Exactly. Charlie's warning, as you pointed out, was crystal clear. Cover every mirror, every reflective surface, because that's how the Night Watcher gets in. And it worked. Even Liv, who initially seemed too cool for ghost stories, felt a prickle of unease. It wasn't the monster itself that initially got to her, but Charlie's very specific instruction. It's almost like the suggestion itself planted the seed of fear.
Precisely. Think about how suggestion operates in folklore and even in psychology. A specific warning can be incredibly potent, directing our attention and amplifying our anxieties. The mirror becomes a symbol, a potential portal. Your reaction and Liv's highlights how readily we can adopt these symbolic fears, especially in a heightened atmosphere like a campfire setting.
And Liv's reaction really shows the story's immediate impact on her, doesn't it? She didn't just shrug it off, she took proactive action. You described her smashing her compact mirror with a rock, a small, almost impulsive act fueled by this newfound fear. But then, as you noted, in the darkness of the tent, something shifted for her. It wasn't about the mirrors anymore, was it?
No, that's where the true horror begins to take root, not just for Liv within the story, but for us as we consider the deeper implications. She has this terrifying realization, a dawning unease, that maybe the mirrors are a red herring. What if the real vulnerability isn't the reflective surfaces, but the very thing Charlie warned them against, the fear of darkness itself? As you said, that's a much more insidious threat because darkness is inescapable.
It truly is. So the campers are in their tents, the story hanging heavy in the air. You can just imagine the tense atmosphere, every rustle and whisper amplified.
Yeah.
And then Liv hears something that's clearly not just the winds or an animal. You highlighted the effectiveness of this moment in building dread.
Absolutely. The wet whisper cluster is a classic horror trope that works so well because it violates personal space in such an intimate and unsettling way. It's not a distant growl or a visual manifestation. It's a sound that suggests proximity, something invasive and unseen. It bypasses rational thought and goes straight to a visceral level of fear.
And what makes it even more terrifying, as you pointed out, is the defense mechanism from Charlie's story. Remaining perfectly still. It's a complete powerlessness. Her body is screaming to move, to flee, but the only instruction she has is to become a statue. That forced paralysis in the face of an unseen threat is just bone-chilling. It speaks to a fundamental lack of control in a dangerous situation.
Exactly. Think about the evolutionary basis of the fear of paralysis. In the face of a predator, freezing can sometimes be a survival mechanism, but here it's imposed by the story itself, turning a potential instinct into a terrifying vulnerability. The anticipation becomes almost unbearable for Liv, as you describe. She can hear the whisper, feel the dampness, and every tiny sound of the tent fabric becomes a potential prelude to a physical touch from something unknown and malevolent.
And then a sliver of hope, or so it seems with the beam of light from her sister's bunk.
Yeah.
Is a moment of potential exposure, not just for the Night Watcher, but for Liv as well. She can't even call out to her sister trapped in this self-imposed stillness. You noted how this shifts the dynamic.
Yes. The sister's light introduces a sudden element of potential rescue, but also a heightened sense of danger. Now, the threat isn't just to Liv, it extends to someone else. someone perhaps less aware of the supposed rules of survival Charlie laid out. It raises the stakes and amplifies the tension.
The sequence that follows is just brutal in its brevity and implication. The flashlight snaps off a small sound with catastrophic consequences. Then the choked scream, the tearing fabric, those awful wet thuds that, as you said, defy any rational explanation. And then the silence. The silence more terrifying than any noise. It leaves so much to the listener's imagination, doesn't it?
Precisely. Horror often thrives in what is not explicitly shown or heard. The wet thuds are particularly effective because they are so ambiguous, yet carry a strong sense of violence and the grotesque. The subsequent silence then allows your mind and lives to fill in the horrific blanks, often creating something far more terrifying than anything explicitly described.
The next morning brings a scene of utter devastation as you recounted. Liv is found catatonic, and the frantic, desperate act of covering every mirror of the campground speaks volumes about the collective terror this story has unleashed, and the fate of Liv's sister. It's almost too horrific to fully comprehend. It highlights the real-world consequences of this seemingly simple campfire tale.
It does. This moves beyond just a psychological stare. It introduces tangible loss and trauma. The covered mirrors become a symbol of the camper's desperate attempt to regain control, to adhere to the rules of the story, even after the horrifying events of the night.
Liv physically recovers, at least to some extent. She can speak, she can go outside, but the psychological trauma, as you emphasized, is clearly immense and enduring. Her insistence that the Night Watcher isn't real is almost heartbreaking, a desperate attempt to rationalize the unexplainable. Yet she can't bear the dark and hoards flashlights like they're the most precious resource on Earth. It's a paradox of denial and deep-seated fear.
Her behavior is a classic example of how trauma can manifest in contradictory ways. The conscious denial serves as a defense mechanism, while the unconscious fear dictates her actions, the avoidance of darkness, the reliance on light. The adults, as you noted, attributing it solely to grief, miss a crucial element, the specific terror instilled by Charlie's story.
And that crucial element becomes chillingly apparent later, doesn't it? Liv isn't staring at the covered mirrors late at night. Her gaze is fixed on the windows. That's the terrifying reveal, the gut punch of the story, as you so aptly put it. It reframes everything we thought we understood.
This is the true brilliance and horror of the narrative's twist. The mirrors, the initial focus of fear, were a misdirection, a way to focus the camper's anxiety onto a tangible object they could try to control. But the real purpose, whether intentional by the storyteller or an unintended consequence, was to instill a deep, abiding fear of the dark itself.
So the very act of covering the mirrors, of focusing on that specific precaution, inadvertently taught the Night Watcher's true target, Liv, to be terrified of the one thing that leaves her utterly vulnerable: the absence of light. Her own fear has become a beacon, hasn't it?
Exactly. The Night Watcher wasn't waiting for a reflection to slip through it, was waiting for the darkness to envelop its prey. It was always there, lurking in the periphery, and Charlie's story meant, as a harmless scare, inadvertently armed the monster by teaching its victim what to truly dread. It's a tragic example of how fear can be manipulated and weaponized.
It's a tragic irony, isn't it? The attempt to protect actually exposed the vulnerability, and now Liv is trapped in this perpetual state of fear, fighting a losing battle against the inevitable. You highlighted the significance of her insomnia.
Her ongoing struggle against sleep is the final agonizing act of the drama. Sleep offers no escape for Liv. It represents the ultimate surrender to the darkness she so desperately fears. Exhaustion will eventually win. The Night Watcher doesn't need to break down a door or find a reflective surface. It simply needs to wait for Liv to succumb to her own physical limitations.
And the final image the story leaves us with is so bleak. The final blackout won't be a power outage, but Liv finally falling asleep knowing it will be the last thing she ever does. What a truly chilling tale that reminds us that sometimes the things we fear are not what we think they are. The insidious nature of this entity turning a protective measure into a vulnerability is deeply unsettling.
What's particularly effective here is how the story taps into a very fundamental human vulnerability, our need for sleep and our inherent relationship with darkness. By twisting a seemingly protective measure, it reveals a deeper, more primal fear that we can all, on some level, connect with.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What seemingly harmless precautions in our own lives might inadvertently expose us to a greater threat. Is there a mirror in our fears that distracts us from the real darkness? Something for us all to ponder in the hopefully well-lit moments ahead. Thank you for shedding light on this terrifying tale and helping us unpack its unsettling layers.
The darkness always holds its secrets. It's in understanding our reactions to it that we can sometimes glimpse those secrets.
Indeed it does. Thank you for joining us in the shadows for this edition of The Walking Dread. If you found this exploration into the darkness captivating, don't forget to rate and follow The Walking Dread for more terrifying stories. We have many more nightmares waiting for you.